This might make things confusing for those who insist everyone pick an M or an F, but people, we have to listen to the science. By 3 or 4, most kids identify with a gender, and it doesn't always match the sex they were assigned at birth.
Just what America needs. More woke, politicized science. We're going to react to Bill Nye the Science Guy getting a major award, analyze some TikTok propaganda, and react to a clip where MSNBC actually questions the Democrats. All this and so much more is coming up on today's episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast, my daily show where I take on the craziest ideas from across the media, across our politics, and across the internet, all from an independent perspective. Welcome back, guys, and I'm excited to show you I finally got my plaque from YouTube. We hit 100K, honestly, many months ago at this point, but they took their sweet time, but I finally got it, and it will be going up on the wall behind me in short order. So thank you all to all of you who've tuned in and subscribed, and if you're new here too, welcome as well. Now up first, like I mentioned, we got to talk about Bill Nye the Science Guy, a supposed scientist turned activist who just received a huge presidential honor from Joe Biden. The president awarded him the Presidential Medal of Freedom, one of the highest awards that can be bestowed upon somebody. Here's a clip from the ceremony.
The Presidential Medal of Freedom is awarded to William Sanford Nye, a Washington, D.C. native. Bill Nye began his career as a cutting-edge mechanical engineer in Seattle before becoming a beloved science educator for the nation. Earning 19 Emmy Awards for his energetic experiments on television as Bill Nye the Science Guy, he also earned the trust of millions of children and families. By sharing the magic of fun and science, he inspires generations of Americans to follow facts and reason and leave the world better than we found it.
I actually have a huge problem with this for a couple reasons, but first and foremost because Bill Nye's not actually a scientist. Or at least not a scientist in the way that he presents himself or in the subjects that he frames himself as an expert in. The only academic credential that he has is a bachelor's degree, so just an undergraduate education in mechanical engineering. Yet he's framed himself as a scholar and activist and scientist who gives expert opinions on everything from abortion to climate change to gender and sexuality. To be clear, I'm not somebody who subscribes to kind of the cult of expertise that only listen to the experts. Experts are fallible too, and simply not having qualifications doesn't necessarily mean you're wrong about something. I speak about all sorts of subjects in which I'm not an expert, but I do dislike it when people kind of pass themselves off as experts in things and they're actually not. That's misleading. So to see that career-long behavior rewarded by the President of the United States simply because he agrees with the ideology and the partisan nature of Bill Nye's misleading attempts to spread ideas and exploit expertise he doesn't have is pretty alarming and disappointing. I mean, we're going to go into it a little bit, some of the stuff that this guy has done and passed off as science around things like sexuality and gender. Take a listen to this clip and let me know if it sounds rigorous and scientific to you and objective and neutral, or if it sounds like partisan ideological gobbledygook.
One thing's clear about sexuality. There's a lot more going on than meets the eye. Female or male, gay or straight, pink or blue. We were taught to see these as binary. Now we're realizing it's more like a kaleidoscope. And this stuff isn't just for adults. Parents know this already. Kids explore gender, expression, attraction before they've ever heard of a spectrum. Take sex. We used to think it was pretty straightforward. X and Y chromosome for males, 2 X's for females. But we see more combinations than that in real life. And even for people with just 2 sex chromosomes, hormones can vary wildly. So can anatomy. What makes someone male or female isn't so clear-cut. How about attraction? Some people argue the natural thing is to only be attracted to the opposite sex. But in practice, it ain't so simple, kids. Some people are gay, some are bi, some are asexual, and some will take whatever they can get. You know what I mean? It's another sexy sliding scale. When you throw in gender, it gets even more colorful. By 3 or 4, most kids identify with a gender, and it doesn't always match the sex they were assigned at birth. And a person's gender identity may change over their lifetime. And culture is getting us new ways to express all of this. How you dress, how you act, talk, how you present yourself to the world. It should be up to you. Sure, this might make things confusing for those who insist everyone pick an M or an F. But people, we have to listen to the science. And the science says we're all on a spectrum. Our labels, our fashion, even our washrooms are still catching up to that truth. I think you'll find when we look at sexuality this way, it is more complicated, but it's also a lot more honest. And it's more interesting. I learned a lot tonight. I mean, I'm this cis male guy who's been living in this world. But this stuff to me, from a scientific standpoint, is just cool. Science is the process by which we understand nature, by which we understand our place in the world.
Yikes. So there's a lot there beyond just the really cringeworthy nature of a lot of that content, which is just uncomfortable to watch. I mean, his creepy thing about, like, take whatever you can get. First of all, ew. Second of all, that's just bisexual. Like, you're not science-y, and you're not doing science if you're claiming that there's bisexuality and then also being attracted to anyone. Yeah, those are the same thing, because there are two sexes. And again, he repeats over and over again this false claim that sex is not binary. That's not true. I've had the evolutionary biologist Colin Wright on this program before to explain why. The short version: there are only two gametes, two types of cells that can join together to form a zygote, a fertilized egg, and that is egg or sperm. There is no third option. It is binary, and the shape of your gametes is what typically defines your sex. It's not actually just your chromosomes or your outward appearance. Now, there's a tiny decimal point of people who really, truly maybe don't produce either, or it's very impossible to label them in this category one way or the other. But almost everyone can be firmly labeled very clearly one or the other. We're not all on a spectrum, and it actually is very clear cut what sex almost everyone is. I'll link to an article where Colin explains this in depth in the show notes if you're interested more on understanding why it's so non-scientific to claim that sex is some sort of colorful spectrum or something. And I get so frustrated too with how he's conflating sexuality and gender identity or gender as basically the same thing throughout this. And that, again, not accurate, let alone scientific. It's also not scientific to suggest that 3 or 4-year-olds can have a firm sense of self that they are transgender. Yeah, no, that's totally at odds with everything we know about brain development and the rather loose grasp that people that young have on reality and their inability to perceive the world around them, let alone the complexities of their inner selves. In fact, the whole concept of gender identity is not really a scientific concept at all. It's an ideological concept that takes as given some deeply controversial premises that are ideological or partisan in nature. I think some of what he says about sexuality in this clip is more or less correct, but the whole thing kind of encapsulates his recent career. I mean, back in the day, he was, I think, much more neutral and much more scientific when he was on TV. But recently, as of late, the career for which he's being now honored by the President of the United States has not been scientific and just inquisitive. No, it's been ideological and partisan and basically just a form of activism masquerading as science, which, given the collapse in public support for science in recent years, partly because of COVID and just the decrease in trust for experts, opposite of the kind of thing we should be rewarding and celebrating right now. No, we need to go back to basics to make science science again and keep ideas and activism and ideology separate. The mix between the two has been really harmful to our society and is leading to backlash, but Bill Nye is the exact embodiment of that. Everything that's gone wrong, not what should be celebrated or honored or rewarded at the highest levels of our society. If you don't believe me from the gender identity clip alone, which to me is bad enough, I'll play you a clip of how Bill Nye speaks about abortion, for example. And let me preface this by saying I'm not taking, even just in this conversation, I'm not taking a position on abortion. I'm not saying pro-life is right, pro-choice is wrong, or vice versa. But I think all smart people understand that the debate over abortion is a complicated issue of morality, ethics, philosophy, and even theology. It's about unanswered questions about what constitutes a human life and where one person's rights begin and another's end. It's something that has divided ethicists and philosophers for honestly years, and some of the smartest minds in the world deeply disagree about this subject. But the way that Bill Nye presents it is as if there's just the science objectively saying that abortion is fine and good and should be legal. And then there's the people that oppose it who are anti-science. Take a listen and see for yourself what this scientific authority had to say.
It's just a reflection of a deep scientific lack of understanding. And you literally, or you apparently literally don't know what you're talking about. And so when it comes to women's rights with respect to their reproduction, I think you should leave it to women. It's really, you cannot help but notice. I mean, I'm not the first guy to observe this. You have a lot of men of European descent passing these extraordinary laws based on ignorance. Sorry, you guys. I know it was written, or your interpretation of a book written 5,000 years ago, 50 centuries ago, makes you think that when a man and a woman have sexual intercourse, they always have a baby. That's wrong. And so to pass laws based on that belief is inconsistent with nature. I mean, it's hard not to get frustrated with this, everybody.
So that clip is a lot of things. Scientific isn't one of them. First of all, it's just like Tumblr level, meme level, low IQ talking points. It's not a sophisticated argument. He's claiming, strangely, that pro-life people don't know how sex works, like reproductive sex, that is. Many do, and still just view the ethical questions differently. He's bringing up the race or gender of people passing laws as if that makes them more or less correct about an ethical debate. In fact, it doesn't. And he's suggesting incorrectly that science can give you answers to moral and ethical questions. It can't. It can help you clarify the details and facts surrounding an issue, but science cannot answer a moral question for society. And for him to weaponize science to try to subvert his own moral views and pass them off as neutral scientific expertise is deeply disingenuous and, I think, really harmful. Yet apparently President Biden disagrees and thinks that this person, Bill Nye, is somebody who should be honored at the highest levels of American society. I don't. In fact, I think, like some of his other honorees, it's a disgrace to give him this medal and shows how out of whack the Biden administration's priorities are. But what do you guys think? I'm curious for your thoughts, because I know a lot of people were once upon a time fans of Bill Nye, the so-called science guy. I've been a skeptic of him really as long as I can remember, but some people have better experiences with him. So I do want to hear from you guys, and do remember to subscribe if you haven't yet. Do hit that like button while you're at it, and do comment with your thoughts. I love to hear what you guys have to say, and I always take the time to read the comments. And now it's time for Brad versus TikTok, my daily segment where I take on the craziest ideas from the Clock app.
Pronoun of the day is slugs.
Today, this TikToker is suggesting that Trump is going to bring back segregation? Yeah, that's what she's saying. I mean, the Supreme Court case she references in this video, Loving versus Virginia, is the case that legalized interracial marriage and declared bans on interracial marriage unconstitutional. Here's what this influencer had to say.
I guess my question is, what happens when they overturn Loving v. Virginia, or attempt to overturn Loving v. Virginia, as an important step towards segregation?
So this is pretty strange. I mean, she's claiming that the U.S. is going to roll back interracial marriage, something the Supreme Court is absolutely not going to do. Just fact check, false. The only thing It's just, I could go into it at length. The only justice who's ever even mentioned it that they go off is Clarence Thomas, but he was drawing a comparison that there's no reason to believe that they would actually overturn it, even if he was willing to, which I doubt he actually is. But even if he was, the rest of them wouldn't go along with that. Like, it's not going to happen. But then even say the Supreme Court did overturn that decision, every state would still legalize it at the legislative level because support for interracial marriage is at 94% in America, according to 2021 data. All right, this is a widespread thing that nobody wants to ban or take away. So even if the Supreme Court were to remove the constitutional protections for it, which again, they're not going to do that, but even if they were, it would remain legal nationwide. So this is, once again, par for the course for TikTok these days. Just fear-mongering, propaganda, and misinformation. And then she just cites some random person's comment or tweet or something as evidence of this. Like, babe, that's not, you can always find a crazy person on the internet saying something. Doesn't mean it's going to happen or that it's a remotely widespread belief. You need to touch grass. Now, in a pretty similar vein, I came across this absolutely unhinged anti-Trump TikTok in response to the recent series of terror attacks in the US.
It's amazing to me that so many people are incapable of thinking for themselves. And that's why we're in this position today. In the past 4 years, we haven't had any terrorist attacks. And then all of a sudden, as soon as Trump gets voted into office, take a look. 2 terrorist attacks in less than a week. But somehow this is Biden's fault? If you guys don't understand how absolutely ridiculous you sound and how ignorant you are, then you get everything that you deserve. And I hope you are the next victim of those terrorist attacks. Because at the end of the day, if you think this is Biden's fault, you're clearly an idiot. Bye.
Well, isn't it lovely? So first things first, the statement that there have been no terrorist attacks over the last several years under Biden is just not true. I'm certainly not suggesting they're Biden's fault, but there were a number of terrorist attacks in 2020, 2021, 2022, and 2023. Google is your friend. I mean, you can go look them up. So just starting off the video with a completely factually false premise, great stuff. And I guess I do agree with the sentiment that people who are blaming Biden for these attacks, I think that's wrong. I do think that's a misguided thing to do. I don't think he could have prevented either of these incidents based on what we know now. And ultimate moral responsibility lies with the individuals who carried it out, not the president. And I have said the same thing about attacks that happened when Trump was president. Unless you can identify a specific policy failure that was in some way culpable for the attack, which I think in both of these cases so far you can't, it's not fair to blame it on a president. I mean, there's nothing a president could do to stop somebody from getting behind the wheel of a car and doing something so horrible like that. So I would say that that's wrong, but you absolutely lose me. And in fact, make me want to call the FBI on you when you start saying, and if you believe that, you deserve to be the next victim. Like, babe, excuse me? Do you need a therapist? Because it's not normal to wish terror attacks on your political opponents. I've been seeing crap like this all over the internet in recent weeks, recent months. And I'm like, am I going crazy or have y'all lost the plot? It is not normal to wish terror attacks on people because they disagree with you. Can y'all get that through your head? She's also suggesting that it's Trump's fault, which is just as dumb as saying it's Biden's fault because, again, there's nothing he could have done to stop it. And these individuals could have done this no matter what. But it's actually even dumber because Trump's not even in office yet. He's not even in power. Like, what are you talking about? I don't know. When I see some of these crazy takes on TikTok, I just can't help but feel bad for the person because this person is not well. Okay, so thoughts and prayers that they get the help they need. Up next, we've got to check in with the media because it's a day that ends in Y. So someone on MSNBC is gaslighting the American public. Take a listen to this clip of Simone Sanders on MSNBC insisting that Biden is actually fine and we're all just victims of right-wing propaganda or something for thinking that he's at all cognitively impaired.
I was very surprised that when you asked the question about mental acuity, he didn't more forcefully push back. The question on the table is the president all the way there? And the answer is unequivocally yes. Now, people can say that you feel as though President Biden might be a little too old to do the job, but he is doing the job, and his mental acuity is there. So I think that there's a conflation of two things here, is his mental capacity and serving another 4 years as old as he is. But those are two separate things, in my opinion. And look, these people that have known Joe Biden their entire political lives, I know Joe Biden is like, can y'all just please defend me a little more?
And
just say this one thing about the president.
It hurt Democrats in November to try to tell the American people something they could see with their own eyes wasn't true.
But it's not true that the president doesn't have the mental acuity.
Of course it is, Simone. American people saw that for themselves in the debate.
What are you saying? He can at least put a sentence together. The president-elect is the one I am concerned about, yes, because I recently spoke to the president.
It's the audacity for me. The audacity of this woman, Simone Sanders, who, to be clear, is a paid employee of the Democratic Party, or at least was for a long time. I don't know if she currently is, to sit there and say he's absolutely fine. Ma'am, we saw the debate, okay? We have eyes. You can't gaslight us. The mainstream media tried this for years, and to their credit, some of them, like Kristen Welker, the host of this show, have finally kind of admitted the truth and done a little bit of introspection and asked some tough questions. But they tried to gaslight us for years. We could all see it. I'm not going to play I played the montage of Biden's gaffes and him brain farting and on camera, all this stuff the other day. I'm not going to, do I have to play it again? Do I have to just roll it every episode, every time we talk about this, just on repeat? I don't want to bore you guys, but I could insert minutes of footage here of him clearly demonstrating cognitive decline. Yet people like Simone here will get up on camera, look you in the eye, and lie to you and gaslight you and say, he's totally fine. He's sharp as a tack. No, you are just a liar. You're just disingenuous. It would be so much more compelling if you said, yes, look, he's old, he's lost a step, but he's not all the way gone and he's still been a good president. You could argue that, and we could have an honest debate. If you sit here and tell us that he's fine and hasn't lost a step, you're a shameless liar or you're totally out of touch with reality. There's no alternative. And I'm not going to let people get away with the deception and gaslighting that they have perpetuated on the American public. And kudos to Kristen Welker, the host of this show, because she also interviewed one of the leaders of the Democrats in the Senate, Chuck Schumer, and she exposed him for having gaslit and lied about Biden's condition with some, what I actually thought was pretty good journalism. Take a look at this other clip from Kristen Welker over on NBC.
I want to play you a little bit of something you said last year. Take a look.
I talk to President Biden, regularly, sometimes several times in a week, or usually several times in a week. His mental acuity is great. It's fine. It's as good as it's been over the years. All this right-wing propaganda that his mental acuity has declined is wrong.
Leader Schumer, what do you say to Americans who feel as though you and other top Democrats misled them about President Biden's mental acuity?
No. Look, we didn't. And let's look at President Biden. He's had an amazing record. The legislation we passed, one of the most significant groups of legislation since since Lyndon Johnson's Great Society, putting in 235 judges, a record, and he's a patriot. He's a great guy. And when he stepped down, he did it on his own because he thought it was better not only for the Democratic Party, for America. We should all salute him. We should all salute him.
These people are shameless. They will look at you and lie to you to your face and then be presented with clear evidence that they lied and then just lie more. It's stunning. I mean, honestly, credit to Kristen Welker for doing her job as a journalist and holding powerful politicians, even from the party they side with or lean towards, the Democratic Party, holding them to account for lying to the public. I thought she did an excellent job in this brief clip here. But Schumer, I mean, this is just disqualifying. I don't know why anyone would ever trust anything he says again after just so shamelessly lying. Yeah, just a year ago, this is not even like the clip she played doesn't date back to 2021 or 2020. It's February of 2024. So just a little less than 1 year ago today, he said that Biden is sharp as a tack and that it's all just right-wing propaganda, suggesting that his mental acuity has declined. Nope. It's the truth. It was the truth all along. You're the one spreading propaganda, and you don't even have the decency or the honor to admit it. And then he just goes into the deflection, BS spin. Well, he's a great guy. Irrelevant. Aging happens to all of us, whether we're a good person, a bad person, an upstanding citizen, or a criminal. We all age, and there's no shame in that. The shame is in clinging to power, far past when it would have been responsible to pass the torch. He, signed all this legislation, and it was a historic president. Okay, that just means Congress passed bills and he wrote his signature on them. It doesn't require you to be sharp to sign your name on something that all your aides have negotiated and worked out with other leaders in your party. And then how much was he really involved, or did he know about any of it? First off, I also think a lot of the legislation is bad and made things worse. But even setting that aside, even taking it at face value that he signed all this great historic legislation, that's irrelevant to this conversation, to the fact that the dude with the nuclear button is cognitively impaired, has cognitively declined. It's been apparent for years now, and yet you all shamelessly lied and gaslit us, and you've now been exposed after that debate when it became undeniable.
With the COVID, with dealing with everything we have to do with, look, if we finally beat Medicare.
And now we have all these clips coming home to come back to haunt these people. And I hope it haunts them for the rest of their time in public life, and that they never live down this stench of deception that emanates from their pores, because it's so shameful to me. They totally betrayed their duty to the public and their constituents. And I'm glad the mainstream media is at least holding them a little bit to account. I really am. But what do you guys think? Are you surprised by this level of shamelessness, or is it just more par for the course for our political class? Let me know in the comments, and do hit that like button while you're at it. Remember to subscribe if you haven't yet, and do comment with your thoughts. I do read the comments, and I always love hearing what you guys have to say. And with that, that'll be it for today's episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast. We'll talk again tomorrow.